Yes.
Well, I've been running business for 25 years. My name is Jonathan Ferriello. I bought and sold, 18 companies over the last 20 years as well. So these are just the holdings we have now. So right now, current employment, 1,800 people. We might be as small as 800 and as big as 2,500. Right now, we're at 1,800 people corporate-wide. As far as how I started, I left home 15 and a half, had 4 alcohol and abusive dads and an alcohol abusive mom. So I learned at a pretty young age 2 things. Number one, when adults are in charge of your life, they can screw up your life. And number 2, the very place you're going to get stability that you're supposed to get at home, that stability and support, you don't get it at home necessarily. So basically I realized that when adults are in charge of your life, if you want to create stability, I can either bet on you guys or bet on my bosses, or I can bet on myself. And that's the key. So I went to work for a little computer company that was in the mall because I played sports in high school, but I wanted a job that was going to benefit me in the future. I didn't want to, not that there was anything wrong with fast food or jobs, you just go in and leave there, but I wanted something to benefit me. So I worked at a little computer company there. And the key is opportunities are everywhere. You just have to know how to spot them. And that's the key. How do you look for these opportunities from that standpoint? As an example, this company I was never going to own. That wasn't my intent to own it. These guys had a relationship with my computer company for 10 years. So my technology company did all their computers. And all of a sudden my VP calls me from my credit company 3.5, 4 years ago saying, "Don't you know this company?" I'm like, "Well, years, yeah. They work with Cycrest. Why? What's going on?" "Well, they're looking for some money." "Well, what do you mean they're looking for? How much are you looking for?" $5 million. I'm like, "For what?" "Well, evidently they're upside down." "Oh, okay." And we kind of knew that because when I talked to our accounting department, they said, "Well, yeah, they're paying their bills, but normally you'll pay your employees, you'll pay your rent, and you'll pay your computer people, because if those things don't work, you're screwed from that standpoint." So basically, kind of reached out to the president at the time, and they basically were looking, and the CEO, and they wanted some money, and they wanted a loan, and I'm like, "Well, why would we give you money? You basically have demonstrated you don't know how to manage your checkbook from that standpoint." And the problem with this company is it grew too fast. It imploded on itself. It grew, and there were some market things that changed, and they basically didn't react to it and be ready for it. And that's where we talk about defense, offense. Like as an example, this company had a $12 million a year contract with Costco to supply them with a certain brands of wine, which is a pretty big revenue stream. Costco was bankrolling this plan where Costco could go directly to the producers without having to go through a middle company like ours. And that was a whole year coming. Everybody knew it was coming. It was a whole year. Basically, they waited till after that became law, and then they started losing the bill, and they kept trying to react as it happened. Management responds to problem. Good management anticipates problem. There's a difference. So had I had this company at that time, and I saw this, have you guys seen the, what's that one with Austin Powers, where he's driving this he's driving a steamroller? You guys seen the Austin Powers? Okay. Bad analogy then. It basically just says you saw it coming. I mean, you have someone, it's like someone's going to take a punch at you, and they're walking very slowly. "I'm going to punch you, I'm going to punch you, I'm going to punch you," and they're taking 10 minutes to tell you this. And then you all of a sudden get punched, and you're surprised you got punched. Right? So this was how this initiative that was going through the people, that was going to be voted on, had a whole year coming down the line. And at that point, it was so easy I would have had 2 plans in the door. This is the plan that my staff would have been working on for 6 months prior to the election, saying, if this happens, here's immediately what's going to happen day 2. This is the plan that's going to happen if we see a modification. If it gets popular, it's almost going to vote, so we know the tides are changing. This is what we're going to do to get ready for the next run, because they're going to do it again. So then the next morning you wake up, you find out it passes. All right, these are the departments that are going to get cut down. This is the changes we're going to make. We're going to make these changes right now. So you have your game book and your play ready to call the next day. That's what we would have done. They didn't do that, and so in time they started eating up millions of dollars of their equity, and they had no choice. So at that point, I said, "Listen, guys, I'm not going to give you money." And they didn't. They went to other banks, but you know what? I'll try to help you find some money. So I introduced them to some of my other banker friends and some of the other companies, and people just weren't interested in it. And at that time, they said, "Well, why don't you get involved?" I'm like, "No, I'm not going to run a company that I don't have complete control over, because I'm highly educated, I'm highly experienced, and I'm highly credentialed, and I'm not going to argue with people who are not those things when it comes to making decisions." So at that point, what ended up happening is it kept getting darker and darker and darker, and their board was in an office like this at one of the other locations, and talking to the bank, and I happened to be conference called in, and the bank was just saying no. And I said, "Listen, if I get involved, do they get a yes?" And without a doubt, the president of the bank said, "Absolutely, Jonathan." Of course, everybody on the board got quiet. And I'm like, oh shit, did I just say that? Because this was not something I wanted in my wheelhouse at the time. So I couldn't sleep at all that night, of course. My brain's like, what am I getting myself into? So I woke up the next morning, put together a 10-page plan, which means I'm taking over the company, the CEO's gone, the president's gone, you know, the shareholders that are in the company, they're not gonna have any votes. They have a minority interest still, because it's not their fault. The other guy screwed them over, but I want them to have some retirement money still from that standpoint. And then took over the company 3.5 years ago. Here we have 150 people. Our sales have increased 32% every year. We keep growing. We just did a major deal where we just did another contract, which brought another $12 million of revenue in this year. That's now that we had to reorganize the company to get taken care of, and now we're up and growing. So that's just the company you're in right now. At that point, that's where we talk about sustainability and scalability. So my job basically is learning how to sustain. Every time you make a decision, you have to ask yourself, is it sustainable and scalable? Scalable, can it get bigger and can it get smaller when needed? And it's sustainable. And what you realize is if you're an entrepreneur, most entrepreneurs don't shift in that skill set. It's all about startups. But again, it's branding, so it's how the market's going to see us, and that has to be a consistent message. So everything you see from our business cards, I don't think there's anybody's business cards up there, but from business cards and everything, you're going to see Beers Distributing and relationship-driven, connecting you to the world of wine and spirit. That's our value. That's who we are. So then we change the branding, internally, externally, how we see it. Everything communicates that same consistent message. If I say McDonald's French fries right now, if I say Domino's Pizza right now, you guys know what that tastes like right in your head, because it's a consistent experience. And that's one of the things that businesses don't do very well, and that's the problem with entrepreneurship. They get it going, hacking it up, everything just starting, baling wire, duct tape, whatever you can do to move the car down the road, but there's not a consistency of experience. And duplicability, scalability, consistency is the second key that most entrepreneurs miss, because they're too busy trying to get it in the door, raise the money. It's in a crisis mode. You're in defense the whole time because you're reacting to everything. So what really successful companies do is all my companies play offense. I'm great at defense. Right? I'm great at defense because that's what I do. I have to go into a company that the ship is sinking and I have to turn it around. I've got hundreds of jobs on the line and I've got to get that company switched around. So at that point, my job is to get the company from playing defense to offense. And unfortunately, a lot of entrepreneurship is about defense. You're dealing with the market. You're trying to figure out, you're reacting to the marketplace. And if you're reacting to it, you can't be controlling it. So my job is to get into a defensive role and switch us over to offense and keep us on offense. Because offense is a lot more fun than defense from that standpoint. So that's what we're talking about. So you see, going to these companies, you're playing offense. This is one of the ways we play offense, making sure the branding is consistent. So then all the people, there's a pride from the employees, pride from the consumers, pride for the people buying our product, and the pride of the people we represent. The answer to that, there isn't one. And you don't want one. Here's the problem. People get themselves set in a certain thing. If you guys want, if this is what you're planning on doing, and one thing changes in that plan, your plan can't materialize. We want to go to Seattle this weekend and you're driving, and no one else has a car. That's our plan. We make the whole weekend to do this. Your car breaks down. We're not going to Seattle. Okay? And so why would you want to put yourself in a box and limit yourself? Because that's the problem. People get set on certain things. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. But what if that doesn't? What if the markets change? There's two environments: the internal and the external. The external environments are things you have no control over. That's the political climate. That's the economic climate. That's what happens. You have some influence through your legislation, but you can't control it. What's going on out there is what's going on. The internal environment, from the paint of the walls in, you have 100% control over that. So what happens inside the walls at every one of my companies, I have complete control over. So what my job is as a strategist is to respond and anticipate what's going on in the marketplace out there, and then build up, make sure I measure my companies to go through that. I get offers for some of my companies at any given time. I've got a pretty fun offer right now from my largest competitor on the East Coast that wants to buy my West Coast manufacturing company. Because they have a manufacturing company in the East Coast, they want to have one on the West Coast because I keep kicking their ass on everything in the West to the Midwest because they can't compete with shipping costs. So I said, I made a joke when I saw him at a conference. I says, well, you know, you should be really, you're kind of stupid. He goes, what do you mean? He says, you should be buying my company and controlling the U.S. with bookends. So that way you have on both sides, the East Coast and the West Coast, and you can ship all the way and get 100% of the business. And then you can buy bigger quantities of stuff and have more, control over the marketplace. So I says, I think you're an idiot for not buying my company, quite frankly, and then I laughed. And of course, 2 days later, I get a phone call from the CEO saying, were you serious about that? And I says, well, let's talk about it. And so we've been talking about it now. So really, but 6 months ago, I didn't even think about that.